The living room smelled like pine and cinnamon, the way my mother's house always did in December. She'd had the same wreath hanging above the fireplace since I was 9 years old, slightly lopsided and refusing to be straightened. I used to think that was charming. Standing there on a cold Saturday afternoon, watching my daughter Lily tug at the hem of her holiday dress, I still found it charming, but almost everything else about the afternoon was beginning to curdle. Lily was 6 years old. She had chosen her own outfit for the occasion, a green velvet dress she'd spotted in a shop window 3 weeks earlier and talked about every single day since. She had let me braid her hair that morning, sitting very still and very serious on the bathroom counter, as though she understood this was a special occasion and wanted to honor it. She was the kind of child who took things like that seriously. Holiday dinners. Family photographs. Being included. My family had gathered for the annual photo, a tradition my mother had kept alive for over 30 years. She had albums going back to 1989, photos of people in increasingly dated clothing arranged in front of the same fireplace, the same lopsided wreath above them, the backgrounds shifting only in small ways. A new couch, a repainted wall, children appearing and then growing and then appearing with children of their own. The ritual mattered to her in the way that certain rituals matter to certain people. Not because the photographs themselves were precious, but because the act of making them meant something about continuity, about a family choosing to show up in the same place year after year. There were 12 people in the living room. My parents, my 2 sisters, my brother-in-law, various cousins, and my sister Dana's 3 children. Dana's kids were already arranged near the fireplace, wearing coordinated burgundy and cream. My mother was straightening frames on the mantel. My father was arguing pleasantly with my uncle about whether to use the timer or ask someone to take the photo manually. I had brought Lily every year for the past 4 years. She had been in every photo. She knew where to stand. She walked toward the fireplace naturally, moving to her usual spot between me and my cousin's daughter, and that was when Dana stepped in front of her. "Actually," Dana said, not unkindly but with the particular precision of someone who had rehearsed this, "we're doing immediate family only this year. Just the blood relatives." Lily stopped walking. I looked at my sister. "She's been in every photo since she was 2. "I know, and it's always been a little awkward," Dana said, smoothing her blazer. "Mom and I talked about it. Family portraits are for real family. We thought it was time to make it official." There was a moment when I believed someone would say something. My mother had turned from the mantel. My father had gone quiet. My aunt was studying the ceiling. No one spoke. A few people gave small, uncomfortable nods, the kind that communicate agreement without requiring anyone to say the words out loud. Lily hadn't moved. She was still standing in the middle of the room, close enough to the fireplace that the light caught the green velvet and made it shimmer. She was looking at me with an expression that no 6-year-old should have, the specific expression of a child who is trying to understand why she has been asked to step out of a room where she believed she belonged. I didn't say anything either. Not in that moment. I walked to her, took her hand quietly and said, "Let's get your coat." She didn't ask questions until we were in the car. Then she asked, in a very small voice, whether she had done something wrong. I told her no. I told her she had done absolutely nothing wrong. I told her she was exactly who she was supposed to be, and sometimes adults made decisions that had nothing to do with the people they affected. I wanted to say more than that. I wanted to explain the whole complicated machinery of family, the way certain people decide without ever quite saying it out loud, that some children matter more than others, and that this is not a reflection of the children but of the people making the decision. But she was 6 and it was cold and the street outside the window was full of lights, and what she needed in that moment was not an explanation. What she needed was not to feel alone. She was quiet for a little while, looking out the window at the lights on the neighboring houses. Then she said she was hungry and asked if we could get hot chocolate. We got hot chocolate. We drove home. I gave her a bath and read her 2 chapters of her book and stayed until she fell asleep, which she did quickly and completely, the way children do when they've decided to stop worrying about something for the night. I sat in the kitchen after that, at the table where I had eaten breakfast for most of my childhood, and answered a few work emails and did not think about my sister. At 11:27 in the evening my phone buzzed on the counter. It was Dana. The message read, "I hope you're not planning to make this into a whole thing. Just a reminder, don't forget who holds your mortgage. Some relationships are worth maintaining." I read it twice. The mortgage she was referring to was on my first property, A small duplex I had purchased 9 years ago, when I was 24 and still learning what I was doing. Dana had co-signed, and for 2 years she had reminded me of it at every opportunity. What she did not know, because I had never told her and had no particular reason to, was that the mortgage had been refinanced and transferred 3 years ago, when I acquired the bank that originally held it. That was not a sentence I had ever expected to type in my own head. But it was accurate. I had spent the better part of a decade building a financial services company quietly and with deliberate patience. I had started with the duplex, then a small commercial property, then a regional investment firm, then a controlling stake in a mid-sized community bank called Meridian Financial. The acquisition had closed 18 months ago. It had been covered briefly in trade publications and not at all in any newspaper my family read. I had not mentioned it at dinner. I had not mentioned it at Thanksgiving or at the birthday party in July, or at any of the Sunday lunches where Dana had occasionally referred to me as being good with numbers, in the slightly condescending tone of someone who considers that a limited skill. The business had grown in the way that things tend to grow when you pay attention to them consistently and resist the urge to announce yourself. I had hired carefully, reinvested aggressively, and made a habit of learning the details of every transaction I touched. I was not a natural risk taker. I was someone who understood risk well enough to manage it, which is a different thing and in many ways more useful. By the time I acquired Meridian, I had a team of 43 people who were genuinely excellent at their work, and I trusted them, and we had built something that operated with very little drama. My mortgage, the original duplex mortgage, had been transferred to Meridian's portfolio during the restructuring. I now held in effect the paper on my own loan, which meant the threat Dana had just texted me from her living room at nearly midnight was a threat she did not have the power to make. I did not respond immediately. I made a cup of tea. I thought about Lily standing in the middle of the living room in her green dress, looking at me with that expression. Then I opened my email and forwarded the acquisition documents to Dana's address. The full filing, the regulatory approval, the transfer records. One document in particular made the ownership structure very clear. I added a single line at the top, "For your records." I sent it at 11:52 and went to bed. She called the next morning at 7:14. I let it go to voicemail. She called again at 7:31. I was making Lily's breakfast, scrambled eggs, the kind with a little cheese in them that she liked, so I let that one go as well. The third call came while Lily was eating her toast, and I stepped into the hallway to answer it. Dana's voice was different than I had ever heard it. Not angry exactly. Tighter. The way a voice sounds when someone is working very hard to stay measured. "Is this some kind of joke?" she said. "No," I said. "You own Meridian. My company holds the controlling interest, yes." Pause. "For how long?" "The acquisition closed about 18 months ago." Another pause longer. "And our mortgage, the duplex mortgage, was transferred to Meridian's portfolio during the restructuring. You're listed as a co-signer on a loan that's administered by a bank in which I hold a controlling stake. That's the current situation." She was quiet for long enough that I checked to make sure the call hadn't dropped. "Why didn't you say anything?" she finally asked. It was a reasonable question, and I considered it honestly before answering. The truthful answer was that it had never seemed necessary. I had not built a financial services company in order to impress my family or to win arguments at dinner. I had built it because I found the work genuinely interesting, and because I was good at it, and because I had started with a duplex at 24 and found I didn't want to stop. The fact that no one in my family knew about it was not a secret I had actively maintained. It was simply a gap that had never needed to close. Until last night, when a gap had opened beneath Lily's feet in the middle of a living room, and I had watched everyone stand around it and say nothing. "You sent me a text threatening me over a mortgage you thought you controlled," I said. That seemed worth clarifying. "I wasn't threatening you. I was just..." "You said, 'Don't forget who holds your mortgage.' That's what you said." She didn't answer that. "Dana," I said, "I'm not interested in making this into a legal situation or a financial one. That's not what I want. But I need you to understand that when you sent that message you thought you had leverage over me. And you don't. You haven't for a long time. I think we both needed to know that." "So what happens now?" she asked. "Nothing dramatic," I said. "The loan terms don't change. I'm not your landlord and I'm not your bank. Your mortgage is administered the same way it was yesterday." She exhaled. What does change, I said, is that I will not be bringing Lily to family events where she's going to be excluded from photographs and asked to wait outside while the real family gathers. If that policy is going to continue, she and I will make other plans. Mom will be upset. That's something you can discuss with Mom. You made the decision. You can explain it. There was a long silence. Outside the hallway window, I could see the neighbors' kids playing in the first light snow of the season, leaving footprints across the white lawn. I didn't think she would care that much, Dana said. She's 6. She asked me in the car if she had done something wrong. Dana didn't say anything for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice had changed slightly, not dramatically, not into an apology, but into something that sounded less defended. I'll talk to Mom, she said. Hey, I said. I went back into the kitchen. Lily had finished her toast and was drawing on the back of an envelope with a red marker. A house with a large tree and several birds. He held it up when I came in. It's our house, she said. I'm putting a star on top. It's perfect, I said and sat down across from her to finish my coffee. I didn't hear from Dana again that day. My mother called in the evening, a short call, slightly stiff, in which she said she had been thinking about the photograph situation and perhaps they had been hasty. I told her I appreciated her saying so. We talked for a few minutes about other things. The weather, the neighbors, a movie she had watched, and then we said goodnight. 3 weeks later, my mother sent a new family photo in the group chat. It had been taken at a small second gathering, informal, in the living room again. The wreath was still lopsided above the fireplace. Everyone was in it. Lily was standing near the fireplace in a different dress, a red one this time, her own choice, and she was laughing at something just outside the frame, her head tilted back slightly the way it does when something genuinely catches her off guard. I saved it to my phone and looked at it for a long moment. Lily never knew about the text or the mortgage or any of the rest of it. She knew that we had left early that afternoon and gotten hot chocolate, and that 3 weeks later she had gone back and been in the photo. That was the version of events she carried forward. That things had been strange for a moment and then had been fixed. 6-year-olds deserve at least that much continuity. The rest of it, the documents, the acquisition papers, the 1152 email, stayed where it belonged. Not a secret exactly. Just a fact that had been stated once, clearly, at the moment it needed to be stated. And then the ordinary business of things had resumed.